Alright, everyone, welcome to another edition of American League East Recap. On today's show, we will be going over where the five teams in the American League East stand as we reach kind of the end of January here now, with just a little over 2 weeks until players report to camp for spring training. And where we stand is that not much has gone on other than the Blue Jays making their first big move of the offseason, which I think is where we should start. Their big move to acquire that power bat that they so desperately needed in Anthony Santander, which happened earlier this week, should be step one of a couple more things that Toronto still needs to do in order to cross the 74 win mark, which they posted last season. That was the seventh worst record in Major League Baseball. Toronto can still use a little more help in the bullpen, a bullpen that was very bad last year, but has had a pretty good winter so far in terms of the Jeff Hoffman signing. Maybe some physical concerns about his MRI notwithstanding. And the reuniting with Jimmy Garcia. It allows Toronto's bullpen to dream a little bit bigger heading into 2025 than it was in 2024. Plus, they could still use another addition in the rotation. I don't think they need to get an ace necessarily. You don't need to get a top of the rotation starter, but depth or a fifth or sixth starter, something like that, I think would be perfect for them. And then they still probably have room for one more power bat, be that a guy who could play outfield, someone who can take maybe more at bats in the DH spot. There's still room, I think, for one more power bat or offensive force in the lineup. So Toronto stands in a better spot for sure than they did before having imported Anthony Santander north of the border, but there's still a little work for them to be done. The Orioles, of course, have had, I think, a disappointing offseason. I think a lot of their fans are a little disappointed. They feel that maybe they brought in some quantity, but not quality. I think Charlie Morton, the signing, is great, but they wanted more. I think they need a top of the rotation kind of arm, whereas Toronto is pretty set in the rotation. The Orioles could still use kind of the difference-making ace at the top of the rotation, but Morton is still a fine addition, and he should very much help the Orioles' young pitching staff. So, and then they signed Tomoyuki Sugano, who again is a 35-year-old, and he was given $13 million by the Baltimore Orioles earlier in December, I believe that was. So the rotation is pretty filled out now for the Orioles. I don't think they're going to be making too many other big splashes. I don't anticipate it. And the lineup is obviously now Tyler O'Neill. He's a guy who can provide some power, kind of excel against certain pitching. He does have to prove that he could remain healthy for a full season, which he really hasn't been able to do. He wasn't able to do that much last year, but if he can stay healthy, I think it could be a certain help for the Orioles. It's going to be hard trying to plug the hole that Anthony Santander, and he of his 44 home runs, leaves behind, but they're going to do their best. And then, of course, they're getting their closer back, and that should be a big help. Just getting someone like Felix Bautista back for the bullpen should be an enormous boost for them. So again, the Orioles, I don't think they're going to have a lot more options to choose from, but there still is room to make further improvements on the roster. As it pertains to the Yankees, they've been very quiet here in the month of January. They got most of their work done in December. It's possible they got all their work done. We'll see. The Yankees will always remain opportunistic and looking for another move, looking for a place where they could strike. It seems to me like the biggest thing with the Yankees right now is trying to find a taker for Marcus Stroman, pitcher Marcus Stroman, and his, call it $18 million salary, which the Yankees are still trying to navigate under. I think it's the third luxury tax threshold, and moving Stroman's $18 million salary would be helpful in that. Of course, they're not going to be able to move all of it unless they maybe pay down a portion of it. Then they can move maybe, let's say, $12 million. But they would have to be willing to pay down something like $6 million in order to make it a little bit more palatable for a team to acquire Stroman, who didn't have a very good season last year, and is a back of the rotation kind of player. He's offered at best mid-rotation production, but at his worst here, which was in 2024, posting a mid-4 ERA, it didn't look very good, and the Yankees have a full rotation right now as it stands, having brought in Max Fried earlier in the offseason, who is a very stable, he is the definition of a stable piece that can really be counted on, especially in the playoffs, which I think is the Yankees' North Star here. And so, if they can trade Stroman, the question is, would they be able to get infield help back? Right now, if Jazz Chisholm moves to second base, that leaves third base as kind of a timeshare between Oswald Peraza, Oswaldo Cabrera, and DJ LeMahieu. Is that what Yankee fans really want to roll into 2025 with? We'll see. It's kind of questionable, and I think they could definitely try to see if they can find ways to improve that from an external point of view, whether via prospects in a trade or the remaining options still on the market. So again, the Yankees, they also have room to still add a couple pieces if they can, maybe swap out Stroman for somebody else. There's still room for them as well. There's room so far for the three teams that we've covered. The next two, the Red Sox, yeah, there's more room. They need a right-handed power bat. They've been in the Alex Bregman sweepstakes, it feels like, since the winter has began. The fit would definitely be a little difficult, given that they have a third baseman in Rafael Devers, who has denied he wants to move off third base, and who the team has kind of said, no, he's our third baseman. Bregman has said he would play second base, but then that would potentially block someone like Christian Campbell, who is very highly regarded in the Boston farm system, from getting that opportunity. If it's not in early 2025, then at some point in the 2025 season. So Bregman would fit. They could make it work, but it's been tough to kind of get any hints about where both sides are leaning. So they've improved their rotation with Garrett Crochet, obviously. They're getting a couple guys back from injury, from a long layoff. I think the Red Sox are in an improved position, but there's still a little something left to be desired from an offensive point of view. Let's see if they can get that done. So again, there's another team that can still do things, and there's still time for them to do it, but they've had a whole month of January to do it, and it feels like it hasn't come together just yet. And then there's the Tampa Bay Rays, who of course we've spent most of the winter talking about their stadium situation and the bond financing and all that great stuff. Well, they still have to play baseball this season. They will be playing it at George M. Steinbrenner Field here in 2025. They've had a very quiet winter. They've made the trade of the Jeffrey Springs trade. Again, it was a future-focused kind of trade. They have plenty of options in their rotation. They also have guys coming back from injury, from Tommy John surgery, from UCL, and they're hopeful that those guys will be able to help fill the hole that Jeffrey Springs, him being shipped over to the Athletics, to the A's. And the Rays, their biggest problem obviously is offense, the lineup and hitting. Unless you feel like Eloy Jimenez is that kind of player who can really transform your offense, it's hard to see how the Rays are going to be a different look offensively here in 2025. So we'll see on that one, of course. But it would be great if they can get together on someone like JD Martinez, wouldn't it? JD Martinez, maybe take a gamble on Austin Hayes. These are the kind of players that the Rays still need to add to their lineup, because there's a lot of question marks, there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of guys have to play really well, and everything has to pretty much go right for this Rays lineup to be in anywhere imposing enough to compete in the American League East. I mean, we talk about some of these lineups in the American League East, the Rays don't even come close. They'll be able to pitch it, they got a great bullpen, but can they hit? Doesn't look like it right now. There's still time for them to do a couple things, add a couple of maybe lower level depth pieces on offense, but they have to do it now, because as we said at the very beginning, pitchers and catchers will report in about 2.5 weeks, and we will continue to cover the American League East leading up to that report date. We'll cover these teams throughout spring training and the rest of the season. But until we do again, this has been the American League East Recap.